Our topic this morning is CAM350 DFM Stream, but we've just released a new version, 15.1. It was released last Wednesday, I believe it was. So we're going to take a look at some of the new features in it to start out. So it'll be a slightly different webinar this morning than you're used to. We'll spend some time on the newer features. And then with what time we have left, we'll go through the standard features of CAM350 and DFM Stream. I'm on a 4K monitor, so if you're having problems with the size of everything, there is a option in your zoom window there to actually zoom, and you can increase the size of the window. It just happens if you're on a 4K presenting and then you're receiving on a 1080p monitor, it's going to be 4 times smaller. That's the reality. Our tools do lend themselves to 4K. I do highly recommend getting a 4K monitor if you don't. That's what I use every day. So, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to take a look at the release highlights. With each release of CAM350 and with Blueprint, our other tool, we put out a release highlights. And I highly recommend taking a look at that with each new release, because it not only is it going to show you what the new features and functionality is, it's going to tell you if new licensing is required. It will list any new enhancements, but it'll actually give you a tutorial on how to use those enhancements. Okay, and that's what we're going to go through this morning. And then at the bottom of this list will always be any defects we fix. So even if it's not a full new release, like a 15 or a 15.1, if we've just done some defect fixes, they'll be listed down here at the bottom of the release highlights. So again, get used to using this each time you get a new release if you're a current user, and I see a lot of you are. Second thing is the start page itself. There is a tutorial on CAM350. This will get you up and going on CAM350 quicker than anything, quicker than me teaching a class, which I've been doing for the last 22 years. You can get up and going and familiar with the tool with that tutorial. There's a netless compare tutorial. One of the prime uses of CAM350 is for analysis. And one of the most important analysis that you can run is a IPC D356 comparison to the graphics that you've loaded. And this tutorial will walk you through that as well. We added Rigid Flex a few releases ago, and there's a tutorial on how to work with that. What a lot of people don't realize with Rigid Flex is the CAD tools can output most of the information needed to build these. So the fabricator is not sitting there going, well, is this a flex zone? Is this a rigid zone? Do I put a stiffener here? All that information can be in the ODB++ or IPC 2581, but kind of locked into that Gerber and NC mentality, which really means we're asking the fabricators a lot. They basically are reverse engineering your design in order to get it built. So there's a lot more risk if you send Gerber and NC. So there is a tutorial on that intelligent format, and we do have a full set of analysis for Rigid Flex as well. As many of you probably know, we do have demos out on YouTube, and I just finished on Friday a couple of getting started or videos on the new releases here. So these go through specifically what's new, and we're going to go through it this morning, but this is for your users and everything, what's new in these releases. If you are a manager or if you're a rep of ours, then you can use this information to see what is in here as well. And if you're not familiar with our YouTube site, this is just a couple of, there's about 120 videos out here, and I try to add them when I get a lot of requests. So all of these here under DFM Streaming and CAM350 will still all apply. They're version 15 and 14, the same interface and everything. So there's about 30 of those. If we get into Blueprint tomorrow, you'll see about 30 of those as well as the new stuff. So do encourage you to take a look at the YouTube site as well. Additional information you'll see on here is if there is a new release available, it will let you know. Some information about our other product Blueprint and guiding you towards the webinar tomorrow on it, even though the date's wrong there. Any training that we're doing, really the only training we have set up here in the U.S. currently is in Albuquerque, New Mexico in May. There's a chance I'll be in the Boston area in the main office at the end of April, so that's a possibility as well. So if you have any interest, just ping your salesperson and we can see if we can get some training set up. Corporate news over here, we'll be at PCB East. We will be, I just did this webinar last week on fabrication versus assembly panels. I think you can probably get that on demand here. Probably takes them a little while to put it up there. It's really fun little seminar with about 70, 80 people about panels and what's a panel type thing. We did, or we are doing PCB Detroit, which is a new trade show here in the U.S. in June, and I'll be speaking at that one as well. All right, with that, let's get into those release highlights I mentioned. I should mention, I don't think I did earlier, that if you do have those questions, the Q&A in the chat windows is where you would type it in. Either one of them is fine. So here's the release summary. Again, I mentioned that it'll tell you if there's new licensing required. If you're a current user, I really should keep in my head that anytime there's a new version, that would be 15.1, not a build 2142, which we do periodically in between new versions. But if it is a new version, grab the new license and install it. And the reason being that our licenses are timed, and there's a certain amount of time before you have to renew it. To make it easier on you, if you install the new license each time you get a new release, you're always on the latest, and it always has the latest expiration date. Okay, so instead of waiting for when you renew your license and getting the license in, you could simply just plug this one in, and it's in the install media if you're a current user. A lot of users don't get this, but we include all the licenses in the install program. And we have one install program that does everything, well, almost everything. It installs the software, will put your license in place if you're a current user. If you're installing on a network type environment, it'll install the license manager. If you're installing on a client for a network type environment, it'll walk you through that procedure and process. If you're doing a standalone system that's MAC address based or dongle based, it will install that for you. So first of all, get used to using the installer. Flexera, the company that makes the licensing software, has changed with pretty much twice a year over the last 5 years. They've changed the license manager. So you should always look to install the latest anytime you get it. Licensing aside, this is the new functionality. I'll be able to show you a lot of this, not everything. I don't have Expedition or pads to show you the integration, so we'll probably just talk about that. And if you are familiar with our integration for other tools, it works very similar. Okay, and that includes everything from linking the two tools up, being able to launch our tool from those tools, and when you run analysis, having the error markers actually annotate back into the CAD database. So you can do all of that, or some of it's up to you. But that's the integration that we've added for Expedition and pads. And then a few more here. I'll just go through them as we're going through this. Actually, I do want to show you this on the integration. So what'll happen with Expedition and pads is you'll have this menu option. We'll install into their menus, and do you want to launch into CAM350? Do you want to launch IPC 2581 or ODB? It's your choice. And it'll go ahead and launch CAM350 from these tools and load the data. You can go straight into analysis. And once you have some failures, you can use the cross-probing to connect to your CAD tool so that you can go and view those errors in your CAD tool. Okay. And we'll, as I mentioned earlier, this is newer, but we actually take the error markers those CAD tools use, and we use those so that you can see the exact location. We've always zoomed in and turned on the proper layers, but just went a little bit further with this release. So again, I can't show you that because I don't have either of those tools, but if you do, it should work. Initial reports is that it is working pretty well. Had occasional issues, but for the most part, it is working well. All right, so we're just going to simply start going through these new features, and they're kind of in out of order in this list. So I'll try to combine them so that you can we can get through this in a little more logical way of doing it. All right. First one is just on loading data and running one of our most oftenly requested features, which is the design compare. So in the past, what you would do with design compare is you would load one set of data, which we'll do here. Let's quickly run through this. And this has some partial drills, so I'll set those, even though it's not required for this particular function that we're going to run right now. But I will show this. And what I'm doing here is showing which layers the drills go through down here. And that way we understand the connectivity. And I extract a net list from the data. That's always good practice. And now the software understands the connectivity through the design. All the layers are labeled as to type. We've extracted nets from the graphics. It brought in the IPC 356 netlist. So if we were running a netlist comparison, we could go straight into that. All of the features are brought into a list here as far as the sizes and everything. Drill and mill tools are brought in. So just that simple loading process does all this for us. If I save this off now, and again, this has been the procedure for doing a design compare pretty much since we put it in there, is that you got to have at least one of your files saved as a .cam file. That's not necessarily true anymore. Okay. What I would do is I would go out to design compare in the past, and I would have the second job loaded and compare it to this one I just saved off. But we've decided, we made an enhancement here. If it's just Gerbers, you'll do it that way. But if you have ODB and IPC 2581 and you want to compare to that, you can go straight to those files. So I go here and we'll switch it over. Let's just say IPC 2581 and browse out. And just pick that file. It goes ahead, it loads it, it aligns it. Doesn't matter what the origin was, it'll align it to the existing data. Then it tries to map the layers. from the incoming design to the existing design. As you can see, it looks like it did a pretty fair job. It's doing it by layer type here. You got other options, layer ID, that would be the order. Looks like that was because we added the outline layers. That doesn't really work for this data set. Or layer name, they're completely different layer names. Now, you can always map, if your layers aren't able to combine here so that we can do this comparison. You can see which layers are going to be compared here. If there's any that didn't get lit in the list, I would go and just manually add them, but then I would just simply run this. So the reality is all I had to do was go in here, load this other data from ODB or 2581 format, and I can do that design compare, and then any differences we'll see down here at the bottom. Looks like solder mask has changed there. You can always sort columns down here in our error report, so if there's anything different here, this particular layer. Let's see, now here's an interesting one. Those polygons are slightly different, which you might expect. So whenever I'm doing a comparison of two different types of data, I'll probably bump this error size up a little so we don't see those slight differences in the polygons. But that's pretty standard coming out of CAD systems for those to be slightly different. I think there's actually some thermal differences in here as well. But suffice to say, this is how you would do a design compare, and it went through and compared all those layers at one time. So pretty nice little feature, but we added the ability to compare to ODB and IPC 2581 without loading it first. So it's kind of a nice little convenience there. One of the things I've mentioned a couple times already is netlist compare, and that's done right here under this pane. And the way this pane works is the first part is it loads the IPC D356 netlist. Well, I think I already showed you. We've already loaded that, so we don't need to do that part. Then it extracts a netlist from the graphics. We did that when we loaded the data. That's what it does. Just throws a number on it because it doesn't know what the names of the nets are. So we've already done this extract, which is the next step. The only thing that's left is the comparison. Now, out of a lot of CAD systems, they'll have what's called no connects or dummy nets. This is one of the recommended ways of identifying those nets. Really, what you don't want to do a full test on them. They're just single point nets or surface mount pads that don't connect to anything, or fiducials. Sometimes I've even seen non-plates in here that whatever CAD system outputs it as a single point net. Anyway, so that we don't have a big, huge list of failures for those, you would identify them here. Well, the problem was that worked, and the other one, which is pretty common, both of those work fine. But what we started seeing was one CAD system out there was doing this. Then unused 2, unused 3, essentially giving them a net name. So now you've confused the software because it's thinking, well, are these supposed to be connected? Are they not supposed to be connected? We don't really know. So the new feature is this adding of an asterisk in there so that you can say anything with the word unused, or if it's a suffix, you can do it with that as well. Can be your no connect name. So it's just a simple little fix. And if I had to categorize this whole release, I would say it's a lot of those things that have been kind of hanging out there for years that we wanted to get in there. If you look at the defects we fixed, the list is really, really extensive. We spent a lot of time going through, and we categorize defects here at Downstream. You send one in and it's stopping you from proceeding, we call that a P0. If you don't like the way the colors come up, at times, that's probably a P2 or a P3. And what happens is, with each new release, of course, we pay more attention to the higher levels. Well, with this release, we were able to drill down into those and get a lot of those lower level enhancements or defect fixes in here that we haven't in the past. So again, pretty good quality release as far as our tool goes because we were able to fix a lot. All right, let's see. Since we're not doing the regular demo, I should mention that once you run a netlist compare, and it's real simple, just to run it like this. If you get no failures and you want to really increase the intelligence of your data, what you can do is you can take that those net names out of the IPC netlist and apply them to the nets that we extracted. And so now you see the intelligent net names there. And then when you're working with the data, I don't know if you're aware of this, but we actually superimpose the net names on the tracks. So you'll have the new intelligent net names, impedance A5, impedance A7, so forth, as opposed to just numbers, which is what happens when you just do the Gerber extract. And while I'm in here, I should point out the tooltips work. You just put your mouse over an item, it tells you what it is. You don't need to query it. We have the net name superimposed, and we can also do decodes if you want to, and pin numbers if you bring in intelligent data. All right, let's move on here. I am actually going to reload this data. Okay, and we're going to go off to our border layer. And I'm going to show you some new NC features. Now, not every designer works with NC, but we have quite a few that do, that go ahead and create mill programs or assembly panels in CAM350. And we've given you the ability to do that a little bit easier with this release. So I have this layer that has the border on it. If I would have brought in ODB or 2581, there'd actually be a line in the center of this and in the center of the cutout, and that indicates the board edge. It's actually the center of this line that we drew over in our CAD system. So to really get the exact board edge straight for analysis, step and repeat, whatever we want to do, we used to run a little utility called draw to one-up border, and it would actually make the software recognize the center of this line to be the board edge. Well, with this release, we did add a shortcut to that. Not only does it do that, but we can use that information to create a mill and route. So if I go in here and do this real quick, draw the board outline, and I'm going to get the cutout as well. Right click, and it goes ahead, and as you can see there now with the blending, it's put a little line in there in the center. So we now know the board edge, but what I can do is go over to drill and mill, go to mill feature, go to mill route, and say, okay, we're going to add a mill program to this with a new table. We're going to use the 100 mill router bit. Click OK. And it's already created our mill program for us, so that, again, we can do arrays and things like that. We just need to set the compensation. You don't center line it. You mill off to the edge, and we're going to use left compensation for this outside cut. And then the same thing here for the inside cut. And you end up with a mill program, okay? So again, that can be used if you're doing any kind of panelization. It's also used for analysis as well. If you're a fabricator, then you can use that to create your mill programs. We do work with a particularly large OEM that does a lot of rigid flex designs. And one of the requirements they had for mill was square mill taps. Now, me as a former fabricator, I hear that and I go, well, you can't have a square mill tap because you're using a round router bit, right? Well, you could go in here to the mill tab manager, and here's what we normally will throw in there, something like that. Or some people don't have the holes; they just have the mills will end and start out here, and that becomes the mill tab. And then they use other ways of breaking it off. Well, what we found with rigid flex is they actually use square ends because they punch them. Or they have tools specifically for dealing with this. So we're not taking a router bit through there. Or we might be using a router bit in conjunction with this, but it will end up with a square mill tab. So we added that capability. And of course, if you create these, you can save them off to a library, so you don't have to recreate them each time. And then there's all sorts of mill tabs that you can create here. But once you create it, then it's just a matter of inserting the tab. You pick where you want it to go. Now, I'm just going to freehand a few of these because I want to show you another new feature that we have, and that is the associate command. And here's a case where we actually had a feature in our documentation tool, Blueprint, that we brought into CAM350. So kind of the newer tool helping the current tool. So if I go to Drill and Mill, and I go to Associate, click on that. I click on my first mill tab, click on my second mill tab. They line up. Same idea here. Click on the first one, click on the second one, they line up. And of course, you know what that means is if I go in here and start moving one of them, they move in conjunction. And I've got the entire database here. I can turn on assembly layers and see that those are underneath LEDs. I probably don't want to put them there. So I could move them around based off of that. But I'll just leave it the way it is for right now. And that's the associate mill tabs, and it works with all of the mill tab types. All right, so that's new in drill and mill. I think that's everything. I want to make sure I'm not leaving anything out here. Again, it's new to me as well. There is some new analysis. We'll talk about that since we're in NC here. So if I go back to Analyze and go to the Drill and Mill Analysis, you'll see one of the other new features we added, and this is drill to board edge. And this was one that was a request from a user. So we added this matrix, different types of drills to the board edge that you can check. Another request was minimum drill size. So we added that as well. You can say, oh, all right, I need 8 mil minimum drill size. If for whatever reason, there's some 6 mil drills specified, I need to look at that and decide what to do. So those two are new analysis in the drill and mill area. And then we actually added one more analysis, and it, let's see, you gotta remember where I put it here. Stacked via analysis. So the request was, I have stacked vias, but I can't have more than 3 or more than 4 in the same location. So under copper geometry now, we will do a stacked via check. So that's the new features in the drill and mill area. Let's take a look at another new feature here. And that is under merge. If you're going to merge in another database to your current database, and we've always had this capability, sometimes it could be a challenge to to map the layers. So we did the same thing that you saw over in the design compare. So you can try layer ID, you can try layer type, you can try layer name. And in this case, looks like layer name gets everything. So that's how we would do it. But anyway, just another kind of nice enhancement to help you when you are merging in data. If you've ever done the multi-panel where you can panelize different boards, it uses the merge capability. And some of our old-time designers that use a different method of panelization than the symbol-based one that we went to. They used the one from like 1996, 97. That uses the merge command as well, or basically you merge in the panel frames. So anyway, we've made that enhancement as well in this release. All right, just a couple more I'm going to hit on here. Let's just run a quick analysis here because I want to show you something. We'll just run this one. The Air Explorer has changed a little bit now that it actually includes more information about what analysis you ran and how many failures you got. So I ran this particular analysis at that size and I got no errors. I ran this particular analysis at that size and I got this many errors. So you'll see that throughout your Air Explorer now, that it does give you more information about what was run and what the parameter that was used, and you can just see that at a glance rather than trying to go off to the analysis tools and look for that. You can see it here in the results. I'm going to bring in a slightly different version here. We're going to bring in some intelligent data because I want to show you the changes to the assembly analysis. I'm going to import some ODB++. Whenever you bring in intelligent data now, it's going to look for a layer that has the component information on it. And it will place these place-bound layers at the bottom here if it's able to find those. And you can specify, if you're the designer, for ODB import, okay, so there's you can set a default component outline in like things like cadence and things like that when you're outputting ODB. Into IPC 2581, it's actually a layer name that you would use for that information. And we still support pads, the old pads layout. Layer 20 is where you put that information in it. So again, you can have all this set up so you don't have to worry about it. And it goes ahead and creates these layers. And then if we go to do component analysis or spacing analysis, it's actually going to use these if they're there as our layers, okay? If they're not present, of course, you still need intelligent data with components, but if you don't have these layers, it'll actually use the CAM350 outlines that are created when you bring in the intelligent data as well. You all probably remember those. They're been around for years, and you would see, here, let me just do it this way. You would see these little outlines here, and people would go, well, how do I turn those off? So it's under the view ribbon there, but we'll use those instead if we don't have a place-bound layer here. But anyway, with that in mind, we'll go to the assembly checks here. We now have the ability to do it by part type or footprint, and you can use filtering along with that. So, you know, I can set up a simple check here. Let's just say I want 10 mils outline to outline from all parts, and I would just simply add that constraint. or in addition to, maybe what I want to do is I want to take all the caps and check those to themselves. So I come down here and do a multi-select there, I do a multi-select here, put the parameter in there, and maybe that's 5 or whatever. It does, for our purpose, it doesn't matter. But anyway, you put that in there and add that constraint. And then you can just run your checks. And again, any failures are going to show down here. I've got a couple of resistors that are right on top of each other. But that is the changes here to the assembly checks. It's gotten a little more intelligent. So we're still doing, we're still kind of reliant upon how accurate the data is coming in from the CAD system. But now we've given you the ability to specify, kind of what layers you're using for this. You're no longer dependent upon us using the CAM350 generated one. And you can do outline to outline, pad to pad, pad to outline, and so forth. So this is new in this release as well. All right, one more thing I want to point out here on the new stuff. We enhanced the design analyzer a couple different ways. We added some new things we look for, as well as the reporting has been enhanced. But if you're not familiar with the design analyzer, it's for gathering the minimums from the design and using those minimums to generate a report that would be used for either, trying to judge the technology of the design, the complexity, or the used for quoting in the fab shop is a lot. So we've always had this report where it extracts all these minimums from the design, and then you can generate a report. But we've changed that report now, so it'll actually do an Excel report. We had our own little format there that we didn't own it, but it was not something that people were familiar with, so it led to a little confusion. But now you can just simply go over here and say, okay, I want an Excel report on this. Put it on desktop, and we'll use the template that we have included. And this template can be modified by you in Microsoft Excel as well. Template, say okay to that, and it goes ahead and creates this report with all those minimums that it extracted. And then, of course, you can do what you want to with it here. You can export it, you can print it. We've added holes per square inch. Any of you have ever done PCB quoting, that's one of the key pieces of functionality they look at. So we added that in there. I think we added this smallest drill as well, a number of those. And again, some of this can be typed in, or you don't even have to have this. If you just really wanted this piece of information, you could get rid of all this other stuff. It's up to you. It's a customizable report based off of the minimums. And if you're not familiar with it, a few releases ago, you can put your vendors in here and their capabilities. And it'll actually tell you if they can do a particular technology over here. So that's enhancements to the design analyzer. Two more new features. One of them is in the areas dialog. Now, if you're not familiar with this, what we would generally use this for is to create an area around this BGA so that we could run a differing analysis, basically validating constraints by areas. So, you could go in here and say, okay, I want to add an area, and then you can draw it with various polygon tools here. Once you've done that, you can label it as a BGA or whatever you want to, and then use that when you're setting up your analysis. You can run just in that area or everything but that area. Well, that's great for analysis, but we also support rigid flex. And while we would love to see people bringing in intelligent data with all this already defined, we realize a lot of people still send Gerber and NC. So what you have to do is you have to set up these areas in order to build the board. So we've given you that ability here with this release, that you can create these new areas that can be different types of areas, bend areas, whatever. Now when you go to add, you'll get this dialog here, and it'll ask you what type of area and how do you want to create it. Okay. So again, we're doing that reverse engineering that I mentioned earlier to build a rigid flex. We're telling the software, okay, this is where our stack up zone is for our rigid board, and this is where the flex begins, and so forth. So you can manually add it now. The other thing you can do, sorry, is decide how you want to show the areas when they're in your system here. So, all right, and then one last feature I want to show you, and this one you may or may never come up against, but CAM350 is 30 years old, and it's based on looking through the board and seeing, you know, a good connectivity through the board. So when we import Gerber data, and that Gerber data has a mirror code in it, mirroring means just that, mirror the data, we retain that, but we show it in the main view, top side looking down through the board. So we don't show it mirrored. And that's been the problem, or people have been concerned about over the years. So with this release, again, one of these little things has been hanging out for a while. We put this option in here right now. Now, personally, I think it should be defaulted off, but I lost that paddle. But if you want to see the data mirrored, check that box so that anything that has the mirror tag in the Gerber file itself will be mirrored. Of course, that would screw up your netlist and all that if you're trying to extract a netlist from the data, but it is available to you. Honestly, I can remember people asking me for this in 2000. So 25 years ago, people were asking for this, and we finally put it in a tool. And again, that probably characterizes the release as much as anything, is a lot of things that have been hanging out. And again, here's the list of defects, and some of these are pretty old. You get into these down here, this is probably 7, 8 years old, okay, that were fixed with just this build, okay, 2142. So there might have been a 2141 that had another list built, but it got enhanced as well. Anyway, if I had to characterize this release, it is catching all those things that have been hanging out forever in the tool, getting those into the tool, lots of little minor defects fixed that, you know, people have had issues with in the last few releases. I think a couple of them, just off the top of my head, double click to launch CAM350 stopped working, but that was Windows made a change, but we still had to fix it, so we did. And that's be double clicking on a file and then have it launch into CAM350. Zooming while in the middle of a measure command, people that do it the older way where you kind of zoom with your plus and minus keys, we brought that back with this release. Well, it got dropped. Honestly, I don't know why anybody uses them, but that's the way that you get used to, and we did bring that back. So there's all sorts of things just like that is what this release is all about. Okay. So that's the newer features. Again, if you want them explained to you a little bit better or in a little more in depth, just take a look at those videos I did, or in the Getting Started release highlights page. If you hide this page, and some people do because they don't want us pushing stuff out, these will be available in your in your actual install. I think in program files is where you'll actually see the release highlights. All right, so that's the new stuff. I've got about 15 minutes left. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to power through a quick analysis demo in the tool. We've already touched on a lot of it, but we'll go through it and give you a little background if you're a new prospect to the tool. So bringing in Gerber and NC, you saw me do this before. We use the auto import function. You point towards the folder. It automatically aligns the layers. This came in version 15. If there's anything recognizable in the file names, we can use that to set the layer types, and that's important for putting the layers in order and running analysis. Otherwise, we do it manually. So we set up these templates that look and say, okay, all my copper layers start with art, and then they have a number after it. And we're going to make the first, that's what this group does, the first one the top and the last one the bottom, or solder mask, or silk screen, and so forth. Okay. So the template's going to look at these layers and or file names and set those layer types for us. And if you have more than one, it's going to look for the one that matches best. Again, here's all the formats. You don't have to bring everything in. If you don't want to see the assembly top and bottom, you can just turn it off. If you want to change the colors, you can. By the way, you can set those colors in those templates as well. It's going to bring in the IPC net list as well as all the drills. Stack-up visualizer over here is for us to set any partial drills, whether they be back drills or whether they be vias. It's up to us. And we can set those here, or we can set them down here in the little chart where you can just type which layers and it'll go ahead and make that change for you, or you can use the sliders here. So it's up to you, however you want to do it. All right, so I've set the partial drills. I hit finish. It's going to prompt me to extract the net list. We'll go ahead and do that, and then we'll go look at the data after it's loaded. Again, we were at this point a little bit earlier where we've got a Gerber extracted nets, we've got an external net list, and we can run net list comparison. Well, what if there are some differences? You know, we ran it and there were no differences. Let's take a look at what happens when there is differences. I'm just going to delete a trace here and run it again. All right, yeah, that one's connected elsewhere. I thought it was. I picked the wrong one there, but let's get the one beside of it. Back into analyze, and let's see. Oh, that's what the problem was. Actually, that isn't the one. Anyway, we'll just go ahead and extract it again here. All right. Now that we have some failures, we have two of them now. The way you would always look at these in the past, you would click on a failure and it would go to it. Okay. You can set the zoom levels in options. That's great. You know, it helps a little bit. It highlights in gray and white to try to help you find the locations. Does it 100% show the locations? No, but we've done some things with recent releases that should help you with this. And number one is you can colorize. Now, you're probably going to pick some really bold colors for your highlights here if you want to colorize it. And so what I would do is actually change the layers to be a kind of a more neutral color, so those highlights really show up. You can isolate just the failure. So here it's just looking at these nets in question here. You can low light everything except for those nets. And again, you can do that with the color as well if you want to. So you can use a combination of all those items when you're looking at failures. We've also put hyperlinking in here. So this was an open. My Gerber extracted nets were 243 and 242. My IPC net list was this A4 because it's an external net. It's just showing me the points. But I can use this hyperlinking to help me figure it out as well. What I'd probably do is use it in conjunction with the isolation or the low light mode. Okay, and go in and look at those. All right, so those are all designed to help you with netlist comparison, and they've come in recent releases as well. The bulk of our analysis is done in what we call the streams editor. It's a checklist-based analysis. We do include a checklist that we got from a major fab shop here in the U.S., and that's what this is. All the parameters are filled out. You can have as many different checklists as you want with different parameters. I could have added that BGA in here and just ran the analysis in that area with certain parameters. But basically the idea is that you just run this checklist against every design. So you load the design, run the checklist. As a matter of fact, you could even script this. I do have it scripted where it will actually load an ODB or an IPC 2581 file, run the analysis, save the database, and exit. So the next person can come along and just open up CAM350 to get all the failures they can go look at. They can even do it in our free database viewer. They don't have to take up a license. So yeah, this is pretty powerful, being able to do all that analysis with just a few mouse clicks. Some people ask about scripting this. I honestly, to this day, don't get that. I mean, I've got that script. I never use it because it's only 2 mouse clicks or 3 mouse clicks to not use it. It's like, is it worth doing the script? And of course, you'll make that decision. But sometimes it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to script something that's pretty much automated. Then you got to have somebody support the script. And that can be the issue. People move on. I don't know how many companies we've went into that either on the documentation side or the CAM side, they switched tools and all their scripts were useless. All right, well, this is about done, but while it is, I do want to show you these constraint panes that is another way to run the analysis. If I just wanted to run one particular analysis, you know, I could come in here, disable everything, and just run maybe that one. And I could just run it here, and then we would see the results down at the bottom, just like we will with the checklist. So this is how you would run individual checks, or maybe you just wanted to run annular ring on the entire design. You could use this and just run annular ring. So it's up to you whether you want to run them in a batch mode or you want to run them individually. Okay, and once you've run them, you're kind of done with this menu. So as we look through here, you can see the failures and you can see the change. You know, now it's giving us the information that what happened when it ran. We've got a bunch of things that it ran with no errors. Okay, and then a few with errors. If I click on that, of course, it goes to it. That's not changed. So just pushing more information out to you. Annular ring, you can still use the charting if you want to. Got a large group of errors. And the charting, you can select the bar in the bar chart. It'll highlight all the errors. And maybe you decide they're okay. You just right click and say validated. And now you're just left with the other errors that, you know, you decide what you want to do with them. Okay, you can add comments to any error. And that's maintained in the database. And you can add comments over in CamView, the free database viewer as well. So that's kind of the analysis methodology in our tool. Works with ODB 2581. Of course, we don't have to do a lot of that setup if we bring in intelligent data because the layers are defined, the layer sets are defined, the net lists are already extracted, the IPC net list is already in there. So a lot of the manual setup that's needed, and it's not real manual these days, but that's needed to run analysis is done for you when you bring in intelligent data. And here's something to think about. You could always, as a designer, bring in the intelligent database, run the analysis, and then when you're ready to release the manufacturing tools, just go do a design compare and compare the two. You saw how quick it runs. Go out and see if there's any differences between the Gerber out of your CAD system and the ODB or 2581. All right, don't really see any questions. If you come up with some after the fact, you can always send them over to dst-support, downstreamtech.com. There's links on the start page to send in defects or enhancement requests. Repeat these webinars monthly. They're for new users or prospects as well as existing users. I always see a lot of existing users, especially with a new release.